How did you come up with Lisbon?
So to be quite frank with you, I'm a big fan of transparency and honesty. And to me, this was first and foremost a tax play. So I had some advantages to relocate to Portugal. We're not just the people that just fly in and out only a few days a year. No, we've bought property. We've relocated my family here. My wife lives here. My daughter was just born 5 months ago, so she will go to school here. And this is also the reason why I use this as my base, and I always come back here.
All right. Bom dia, good morning, or buongiorno, Jan. How are you doing?
Bon dia to you too, and good morning to you and everybody listening. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. What about yourself?
Amazingly, I'm very happy to be here. I mean, as you know, we were chatting like 2 seconds ago. This is my new experiment here, and we met Sunday. So, the other people I asked to join my podcast are more, friends I knew for a longer time, but we had such a fantastic conversation on Sunday at the birthday party of a friend that I said, I need to invite Jan on the pod, and we organized this last minute. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'm happy to chat with you.
That's great. So you're here because your story interested me so much, and most of my friends are in tech product or in general in this industry, and although you had an experience there, you do construction, and you have a fantastic story in terms of personal family, citizenships, and focus of your business. So in my view, I mean, this is going to be terrific interview, and I would love to ask you, first of all, do you feel Brazilian? Do you feel German? How many passports do you have?
So that's actually a very good question. Perhaps I bring it back and I give you like a short summary. So to everybody listening, so my name is actually Jan Pablo Laenge. It's a German name. It has the A with the two dots on top, which is why in Germany it's pronounced Länge. And then if you go to anywhere else like Brazil, South America, it's Laenge because we don't have the A with the two dots on top. So it's written AE. So depending on which region of the world, you pronounce it differently. So my dad's German, my mom's Brazilian, and I grew up mostly in Latin America, in the US, and somewhat in Europe. So I was born in Brazil, but I grew up first in Ecuador 12 years. I lived in Colombia for a while. Then I moved to the US. I lived in Texas for a while. And then I went to boarding school to Europe, where I spent some time in Europe as well. And then, later on, moved around Europe for college. And then later on, many years later, I ended up working in Europe, in the Middle East, and now in South America. And I ventured in different paths, different industries. So I've seen a few things.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I know a lot of people who even the name carries the whole story. Sometimes, we think, there is a lot behind these names. And for example, I also, in my mind, your surname would have been Laenge. And instead, it's something different. And out of curiosity, where did you do the boarding school?
So I went to boarding school in Germany.
Oh, in Germany. Okay.
In Ulm, but this was when I was 15 till I was 18. But before that, I was in a private German school in Ecuador. Before that, after that, between those two, I was in a regular high school in America. So I've looked at a few things. But now I realize that I didn't answer your question because you had actually a question. So whether I feel more Brazilian or more German, I think that those two things. So I don't put them in the same spectrum. So I don't see it like think of it as a spectrum. On the very left, you would have Brazil, and on the very right, you would have Germany, and you're somewhere along that line. I think there's a simplistic way of thinking of things. I actually think that these two are not mutually exclusive. So I would say, for instance, I can be 100% Brazilian and 100% German. So one doesn't take away from the other. They're like on two different spheres. So, and I consider myself fully Brazilian, but also fully German.
It's a great actually angle, and I totally align with that, especially for my own set of considerations about this kind of maybe new movement of global citizens, which in the end it's going to eradicate in different cultures and live extensively, in multiple ones, and there is no an exclusive concept, right? I'm something but not something else. But in my view, it was super interesting. When we had a chat this weekend, you were telling me, Ale, for me it was quite interesting because I was growing up in Germany, but at the same time I realized, you said something that if you can expand on this, maybe it's super interesting that I've never considered, because for me, when we met, well, you are a European guy or you are a white Caucasian person, right? I for me, I even didn't consider, the fact that, oh yeah, you could look, eventually different. Because for me, you look absolutely I mean, there is no difference. And you touch one point which is very sensitive, also politically sometimes. And so when you grew up in Germany, did they make you feel different?
Yes, absolutely. So I'd say a very, very crucial difference that if you travel a lot and depending on where you move, you'll be perceived as different from maybe how you grew up perceiving yourselves or other perceiving you. So you always have to like switch back into the cultural context in which you're in. So I'll give you an example. So growing up in Ecuador, I was always a foreigner, but I was a German Brazilian, or for most people, I would be considered a German. As an immigrant, my father was German. I spoke German. We lived in a more, let's say, German household for them. The moment I stepped foot in Germany, everybody made me feel like while you may be German, you have a German name, you have a German passport, and you speak fluent German, you just don't look like the Germans. It's not even just the skin color. It is also the skin color, but it's also maybe just facial features, stuff like that, that people would associate with you being an immigrant. And that's something, for instance, that we don't have in Latin America. Not as much, at least. Because in Latin America, you would have a lot of we have a lot of movement, but everybody speaks Spanish, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
Everyone that, like most people that immigrate there are either Latin, and we consider part of us, and then we have like what we consider gringos, which I know that in Mexico it has its own connotation, which would be you're an American. That's where the term comes from. But if you go further south from Mexico, they use the word for anyone who's Western. So a European would be a gringo, and a German, and a Norwegian, but also an American. And then in Europe, we don't have those sort of concepts where we say, okay, everyone from this region versus everyone from outside this region. So in Europe, we do differentiate, and that's because we've had a lot of movements in every individual country. So for instance, in Germany, after the war, they had to rebuild the country. So they invited a lot of Italians. So there's a big Italian community there. They invited the Turkish. So there's a Turkish community there. So if people see that you're not, let's say, purely German from the way that you look, they already put you into, this is the mental shortcut people take in their cultural context. You must be, because you speak fluent German, you must be a descendant from an immigrant group. And this always has like the connotation of the people that come from either a lower social class, that came as workers, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of like the baggage that people put in their own interpretation when they see this through their myopic lens. Which is different from a different context, right? And I've also recently made an experience with that. So I just expanded my business within Latin America, and we moved to Guyana. When I'm in Brazil, I'm just, let's say, brown caramel color as everybody else in Brazil. I don't feel any different, and no one has ever treated me any different. So by all extents and purposes, in Brazil or in Latin America, I'm Latin American. But the moment I step foot in Guyana, I'm a white person.
Oh.
But they see me white the same way as we in Latin America see what we call quote unquote gringos, because their cultural background is also completely different from the rest of Latin America, because Guyana used to be a colony from the UK, and the UK brought in a lot of people from India and a lot of people from Africa. So their mix is a lot of, let's say, Indian as an actual Hindi culture, plus let's say Black African culture. They are, while they're in Latin America, they consider themselves Caribbean, and they're a mix of those two. And everyone that doesn't fit in those buckets, to them, is essentially white. So this is the only part where I've actually felt white, purely white. Maybe that, and in South Africa.
Wow. So along these lines, do you think we can say, so do you think in the world there are first-class citizens and second-class citizens in each country, in each city, depending on your experience? And or I mean, it's a rhetorical question, but
yes. So I personally don't believe in those concepts, because I think you can be a first-class citizen here, but you go somewhere else, you're not a first-class citizen. And again, it depends on the social construct you're in, and then what people value there. If I may give you a few examples. So in Latin America, you being European, you just by virtue of you showing up there and by the cultural baggage that this carries, you become slightly, people put you slightly above them. This is something that we have in Portuguese. They call it síndrome de vira-lata. In Brazilian culture, at least, there's something similar for the remainder parts of South America. So in that sense, you're being slightly put above them. Now, if you, for instance, have like a migration background, something like that, we see a lot of, let's say, spur of a right conservative sentiment in Europe. People more or less would like put their own people first, and then maybe everybody else is either equal or below, but never above. And then there's also cultures where you can never simply be equal just by virtue of what they believe in. If you go, for instance, to Saudi Arabia, they've been told for a couple hundred years that they're God's chosen people. It's difficult to compete as a foreigner. While you're being welcomed, you're never going to be the same. And you feel the same in China, like where you can be equal, you can be something interesting. People can look up to you in many ways, but you will never be Han Chinese. There's no way around that. Even if you speak the language fluently, you'll never be one of them. So that's like this microscopic differences that make you either accept or reject a body, and it really depends on how strong the culture is within that place.
100%. And Jan, by the way, my point was because I'm building up this kind of framework, and today I didn't repeat it, but my point is, as I write often on X, I'm always surprised by the fact that, somehow, like for example, in Europe, we have been brainwashed for years, objectively, having certain ideas such as, hey, Brazil equal danger, poverty, and China equal underdevelopment and poverty as well. And then you start traveling and you go out from this bubble of media that maybe you grew up with, often it's a very narrow media bubble. And this narrow media bubble has its own nuances in every city. So that the bubble you may have in Paris is going to be different from the one in Berlin or even within the same country. When you start traveling and you go to China, you go to Brazil, you meet and you become friends of Brazilians, Germans, or Japanese people, Chinese people, etc., you realize, hold on, the old set of values or my lens of interpretation doesn't correspond to reality. So the purpose also of one of the many purposes of this podcast that we are trying to discover together is, let's discuss it, because actually this doesn't make sense. So or even in Italy, we have a lot of, we call them pregiudizi or biases or prejudgments, I would say, to translate, where, okay, we feel someone not one of us, and depending on where it comes from, automatically, well, there is a sort of social hierarchy, which ultimately in 2024 doesn't make sense. And that's why it was super interesting to have you here. And out of curiosity, do you mind to share, in a very much a freestyle, the places you enjoyed, you enjoyed in the past to be more often, and even now, the places you like more and the places you like the least?
Wow, that's a very open question, depending on what you're going to optimize for. So from my own, let's say, cultural perspective, right, from what I've experienced. So I would have to categorize a little bit. So I would say, for instance, if you want, it depends on what you're going to optimize for. If I'm going to say lifestyle, again, it depends on what do you understand under lifestyle. So for instance, I like spending time in Brazil a lot, especially in Rio de Janeiro. Why? Because it's warm year round. Yeah. People have like this lightness towards them. There's music playing everywhere. Everyone, you can kind of feel that everyone's lighthearted and having a good time. There's like this comfortable laissez-faire vibe in the city. You always have warm weather. Like the winter is never colder than like 20 degrees Celsius. It's very rarely it's over 36 degrees. So that's like the span between winter and summer. You have a very big city. We're talking about 6.5 million people officially. There's unofficially, it's many, many more. So it's a very, very big city, like a European metropole, like it's twice the size of Berlin, if you put it into perspective.
Of course, yeah.
But at the same time, you have a beach that's usable, like very pristine white sand beach. You don't see that everywhere in big cities.
Wow.
Think about it some more. Like if you think of a Western city that has a beach you can actually use, Sydney doesn't have it. You don't have that there's almost none. And then at the same time, while you're in the city this size, you're in the middle of the jungle. Like right behind, you will have the national park where the Christ statue is. Everybody knows it. You have monkeys and tucanos and all these like animals. So you're like in a city with all the offerings of a city, but you also have a beach and you also have the jungle. So I like that construct. At the same time, let's say, cultural challenges that Rio de Janeiro brings with itself. So let's say safety, security, and so on. I think in the West is being a bit portrayed as like more dangerous than it is. I've never encountered any issues, but it is true that you're not as free as you might be, for instance, living in Vienna or in Zurich. You cannot just walk in dark alleys at night at 2 a.m. There's something you cannot do. So if I would, for instance, say lifestyle, if to raise a child or something like that, I would much rather prefer Europe, because you can actually send your child to school in a metro by themselves, right? So that's another level of peace of mind. You don't have to find out all sort of services that we're used to in Europe that are being taken care of by the government, you kind of have to figure out yourself in South America. So we're talking about private education for your kids. You're going to have transportation you have to figure out on your own, because taking public transport is either too inefficient or slightly dangerous. So all of these things. So it depends on what you prioritize. But for fun, I prefer living in Rio de Janeiro, and other regions that I like. I love the time I spent in the Middle East. For vacation, I like Southeast Asia a lot. But in terms of living, I'd say, Rio de Janeiro is, for me, my personal blend is probably at the top of the list.
So interesting. So interesting. I have never been in Rio de Janeiro. I have to. I've been in São Paulo, and then from there I went to. But I was with my parents at the time. Went to Uruguay, Punta del Este, and I still have very good memories. But that's why I'm super interested, because for me, I know a bit more. I mean, besides Europe, I know a bit more Asia. But for the old South America, it's relatively, for me, it's ixunt leones somehow. I don't have direct experience, but a lot of friends who have. And Rio, I heard so many good things, and I completely agree on the angle. It's never a matter of, hey, well, no brainer. The answer is this one. No. It's always nuanced, and at the same time, there are also so many stereotypes. Because, for example, in terms of safety, it is true for sure. Rio, São Paulo, they have their own issues. But even if you take Rome or Paris, at 3 a.m. in the night, I guarantee you there are places where you don't want to be, or maybe it will never happen, nothing to you, but still you're not going to be there. And if you have for example, a kid or a daughter, 16 years old, I'm pretty sure every parents in town perfectly know, don't be out at night in certain places. So it's relative.
So I have actually a funny anecdote about that.
Go for it.
So I like luxury watches, or like watches in general, watchmaking. So I remember, like, for the first money I earned, I bought one. It was an Omega at the time. I've upgraded ever since. But I used to wear it everywhere I go. Like, I go to Latin America.
Was it a Speedmaster?
It was no, it was a Seamaster 300.
Seamaster 300, yeah.
But I used to wear it everywhere, and my watches, I wear them everywhere, and I go to the richest places in Latin America, but the poorest places in the jungle and even the favelas, and I wore this watch everywhere. And I've only been robbed once in my life, and it was in Munich, Germany.
Okay,
Christmas market.
For sure.
It was not in Brazil, in a favela. It was
sure.
not somewhere in Venezuela.
Sure.
It was literally in Germany. Just to play into what you were saying.
100%. I heard so many anecdotes like this, but it's the same of pickpocketing it's so true. It's so true, and it's so relative. Just one topic on the side, because we are touching a bit South America. We are missing both US and Middle East. I have two questions. The first one is Middle East, where, out of curiosity, and overall, what's your experience there? How long have you been there? What do you do there?
So it was back in the time. So I finished college and I started working for a management consulting firm, and I was shipped on assignments in different countries.
Oh, okay.
And my first projects in the Middle East were in Dubai, and then later in Saudi Arabia. So I spent some time in Riyadh first, and then in Jeddah.
In Jeddah, yeah.
And while I was stationed there, it was, I must also say, for context, it was 2018. I know it sounds like it's recent, like 6 years ago, but in terms of, let's say, the culture in Saudi, things move very, very, very fast there. So Saudi 6 years ago is not Saudi today, right? So a lot of things have developed. So I think for, let's say, what Western people deem as more congruent with their lifestyle, things have leaped over these past 6 years. So at the time, it was not the place that everybody wanted to stay in. So what ended up happening is that we would, after a few months in Saudi, we would start living in Dubai on the weekends and only traveling Monday to Thursday to Saudi for work.
Yeah.
And I was surrounded, so I was living in Dubai, and I was surrounded by a lot of, I didn't have my friends from Germany or from Latin America for that matter. So I became friends with a big group of Lebanese people.
Oh, yeah.
And by the way, Lebanese, the most hardworking.
Amazing, yeah.
So I became really close friends with them. So I used to go to Lebanon a lot. So my experiences in the Middle East have been Lebanon, pre-war, and Dubai and Saudi.
I have direct experience in Dubai, of course, and with Lebanese people, Lebanese people, one of the most awesome people I think in the universe, and also the food is great, and the
Absolutely.
hospitality is incredible. Actually, never been to Beirut, but I have a friend of mine who is full in love there. And by the way, the story of spending the weekend in Dubai, living in maybe the family remains in Dubai, and for professional reasons, people go to Riyadh maybe 3, 4, 5 days per week. I heard this story so many times in the past, but I get your point. This could be interesting for as a catch up to somebody maybe living currently in Riyadh, because I totally get it. Things may have moved forward. And another question I had was, because I know, of course, I'm European, I'm Italian, so I know perfectly what you mean when you refer how in Germany, depending on where you are coming from, there is this kind of bias, and eventually, oh yeah, maybe you are coming from immigrants of 2-3 decades ago, and they put you in a virtual, social hierarchy. What about the US? Do you think the US is more open as a society in these terms?
That's a hard question to answer, because in America, if you want to understand the culture in America, from my view, and granted it's a bit outdated, but there's so many facets that you need to unpack to fully understand how Americans view that. So America has always been a state of immigrants, right? Everybody that's come to America has been an immigrant. I personally feel, to answer that in a nutshell, I think in America it's less racial and cultural driven. It's more socioeconomic. So, for instance, if you are a Middle Eastern person or Indian person or something like that, and you are among, let's say, the winning top 10% in America, you are welcomed as anybody else. So there's a saying in America, it's like all money's green, right? And I have felt that. At the same time, there is some sort of baggage that people kind of cling on, and there's patterns that they also recognize, as I had explained with Germany, right? So, for instance, when I came to America, I mean, at the time I was like 14 years old, 13 years old, so into high school, and naturally everybody sees me, and for them, they don't know what a Brazilian is. They just don't. It's not part of the culture to understand that. So to them, the shortcut is like, you're Mexican, right? Which doesn't mean that this is bad or good or anything related to that. At the same time, I, at that point in time, had not been to Mexico, so I don't know what that means, right? Or what it fully entails. I do think that Europeans are a bit more based on culture and heritage, and in America is less so.
Interesting.
Like, you can move to America, and within a generation or so, you really become American. Like, no one would walk up to the street to you if you look Asian and say, like, you're not American. Versus in Europe, I have felt that you can be third, fourth generation Turkish in Germany, and people still identify themselves as Turkish. And then the outside, this is how they identify themselves. But then the outside community, the Germans, look at them and say, no, they're Turkish, right?
100%.
Even though, like, for 3 generations, they've been born and raised in Germany, right?
That's so true.
You don't have that in America.
That's so true.
You cannot walk up to like someone in America and say, like, you're Irish, right?
Yeah.
No, they're American.
100%. That's the beauty. And yeah, sometimes in California, you think to be, if you what can I say, you might have the feeling suddenly, am I in Asia? Because, everybody is Asian American, and it's full American. There is no kind of, it's true. It's a different kind of approach. And okay, US, Europe, Middle East, and I asked you already this question, but I think this is very interesting as a personal story. So, what is your current job?
Yes. So currently, I co-own it with my brother, a small conglomerate. We're 11 companies in 9 countries, and we do a plethora of things. This is all organically grown. This is a family business, so. We started off with a construction company, building critical infrastructure assets in Latin America, mostly oil and gas pipelines back in the day, but nowadays we also build renewable energy, hydro plants, offshore wind parks, solar farms, these sort of thing. So that's one of the businesses. And then we have things that we have acquired along the way that we vertically integrated into our business, but they turned out to be such great opportunities that we spun them off and they became their own standalone business, such as a drilling company that does HDD, stands for horizontal directional drilling. This is when you drill from the side to bypass obstacles. To give you an example, imagine you have to to cross a fiberglass cable. You have a lot of tech listeners here. So you need internet for the world to be connected and to work. For that, usually you need fiberglass. And if you have to pass it from A to B, but in the middle of that way, there's a highway or something like that, you cannot just lay it on top of the highway, right? So you need to drill under it. Or if you have a river and you need to pass a pipeline, you need to drill under the river. So we do that sort of thing as well. And then there's other businesses, like we build hydroelectric power plants that we operate ourselves. We have one in Ecuador at the moment. And we have a couple of other businesses, like a green reforestation project where we have teak wood, which is this wood that's very, very high end. You use it in yachts and
Oh, yeah, of course.
so
Yeah.
you plant it and it needs 25 years to grow. So you need a large area to do that. And you do that in a sustainable way. And you create a plan so that you can kind of collect the wood in, depending on the hectares that you plant, in such a way that constantly there's one regenerating and one being taken apart. So we do that too. And that's just a few, to name a few. We also have a real estate company here in Portugal that I'm developing myself because I see an opportunity here, driven by market conditions. So we do a little bit of everything. I would consider it more like anything that makes economic sense and that where we can leverage our knowledge or our assets, or it fits well into our portfolio strategy. And I think the one thing that they all have in common is that we prefer, I would say, the old economy things as opposed to, let's say, these like high leverage tech stories.
And I find this super interesting, okay, because from my angle, I've been doing more startup tech, or in general things that can be, scaled up because there is no essentially material infrastructure, with the increasing high marginal cost and so forth and so on. You look to me to be completely on the other side where there is
Yes.
infrastructure, etc. And
I think it's easier, actually.
it's exactly so that's exactly my kind of thesis, and that's I would like to have an open discussion on this point, because everybody right now, is doing, okay, let's do the new wrapper on AI for essentially leveraging the new essentially cycle, crypto AI, etc., etc. So everybody's focusing on, okay, let's do B2C or B2B SaaS, so software as a service, great gameplays, but at the same time, I always build with some friends some jokes such as, maybe if you do kind of app for getting how do you go home services in Lisbon, for example, and then expanding in Europe, in my view, you can have a sustainable business with no VC money and potentially do very well. So I'm super interested in understanding your perspective, being on that side, and how do you see, the opportunities? Because for me, of course it's a family business, so there is a different story behind, but still, I'm also curious, how do you see the opportunities across countries? Because you have 11 companies spanning from Brazil, Ecuador, and other Argentina, and so far and so on. You are doing real estate in Portugal. What's your take? So how pros and cons?
So, well, the reason why I prefer what I categorize as old industries, like the old economy, and why I think it's better than working in tech if you are hardworking and driven, is because so making it big in tech, and when I say making it big, I'm not talking about like being an employee somewhere. I'm talking about you owning your own business to some extent to maximize, let's say, returns, right? I think that nowadays playing in tech is a little bit like what in the 90s or 80s was trying to become a rock star, because it's obviously the market entry barriers are very, very low. Anyone with a MacBook and with some thought and some grit can sit down and code something. But this has also created this situation that if you open up your app store on your phone, like there's more apps than there's like corners of sand in the sea. Yeah, exactly. There's that many, and this is in the you all fight for eyeballs, right? You can check on everybody's phone, like how much time do people spend on their phone? It's going to be between 3 to 6.5 hours a day. Everyone's competing for people's same 6.5 hours of attention on their phone. Like that. This is the market share, and you're trying to compete with any sort of service that people may deem worthy or not, but you're all competing for the same thing, right? And here's the thing with that. In tech nowadays, and I've worked in tech myself you're in a situation where you have to make a product that has a large enough TAM, so total addressable market, you have to build a product and find product market fit relatively quickly. You need to be able to scale it in like very, very high speed. You need to be able to create a vision, to motivate people for that vision. You need to be able to execute towards that vision at record speed times. You need to generate enough buzz and attention, and all in a very high scale, while you're also getting in venture capital money in order to fund this idea. Because even though you may be the best at this, someone else can see that, copy it, and if they have more resources, they beat you to market to it. So this becomes, so summing up what that means to me is that you all compete in a market where you have to be absolutely perfect or very much close to perfect. And it's a market in tech, winner takes all. How many search engines do you know?
One.
There's
Actually,
one.
no, two, because I love DuckDuckGo, but still it's the alternative too. It's not the viable alternative. Yeah.
Then you also think of operating systems. Okay, there's not one, but maybe there's two or three. That's it. And those take, the top 2-3 take 85, 90, 95% of the market share, and everybody else is left with the crumbs.
Hyperbolic power law, for sure.
So we don't have that in, let's say, the old economy. So I'll give you an example of, for instance, a drilling company. So how good do you have to be the best at drilling? That's maybe even the wrong question. That's the way tech people would like to see it. I think the way you need to see it is, because it's asset heavy, there's not enough people investing in it, right? So how good do you have to be? Well, good enough, slightly better than the worst competitor in the market. There's enough jobs for you to land there. So that's one thing. Then the other thing is there's not a lot of competition. There's not a lot of people doing it. Sometimes we go into countries to build pipelines. There's 3 companies in the country that may be able to build the project. So the 3 companies are bidding on the same project. And then they find out that the project is too large for anyone to do it themselves, by themselves. So 2 of them are going to have to do a joint venture. So your chances of landing a contract like this is 66%.
66, yeah.
That's competition that you cannot even imagine. It is just like light years away from what we know in tech, right? So there's not a lot of competition going on. These companies and these industries are not very revolutionized yet. So many of them don't have ERP systems. Many of them don't really have processes and systems.
That's the point, indeed. Yeah, totally
so
agree.
there's not a lot of competition going on. So the market entry barrier is high, it's capital. But once you're in, it's easier to conduct the business there. You can grow it steadily. You can actually profit from it every year. You don't have to inflate the balloon as quickly as possible. And it becomes like, the album from 50 Cent, Get Rich or Die Trying. So it's not like, okay, you hustle for 7 years and either you become a billionaire or multimillionaire or you go bust. That doesn't happen in the old economy. And I think that's a bit more sustainable. And then the last thing I want to say with that is that you're not trying to reinvent the wheel and put something new in front of people to see whether they like it or not. You're not trying to disrupt you. You're trying to build something that people need anyway. So when you think of tech, everything you touched on the topic of AI. Well, for AI, we're going to need a lot of electricity. Someone needs to generate it. Otherwise, if the electricity price goes up, computing for the AI becomes more expensive. All of a sudden, people can't do AI anymore. So there's a physical limitation to AI, right? It's the cost of electricity, the marginal cost of electricity. So someone needs to produce electricity, more of it, and ever cheaper. So that's a market where you can also compete in, which has far less competition. It's far more stable cash flows, and it's easier to succeed in it, right? Or, for instance, laying actually down infrastructure such as the fiberglass cable, where the actual internet flows through, and it's connected between America and Europe and so on. You can do that. You can participate in that economy as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I find all these angles super interesting because, of course, all these topics would require to be expanded for 10 hours. But I find them unique, especially because if you spend a lot of time in the tech or crypto Twitter or now X, you end up having the same kind of thesis. Essentially, it's very difficult to have contrarian thoughts, and I think these contrarian thoughts, I take it and interpret it in a slightly different way for what I do, but I came to a similar conclusion, and I will be super short on this because I have so many questions for you. So I'm shipping products that are very technically very complex, so that there is, if there is a top engineer in their 20s or 30s in San Francisco today, eventually former founder with exits, he can raise funds maybe very fast. He can compete with me on so many things, and maybe he can beat me. I can be better. But there are certain things, with given my specific background, knowledge, etc., where they can't compete. And on those elements, the barrier access is higher. I can ship it faster. I don't need even seed rounds from investors. I can scale up being profitable on year one. This happened to me this year, and it was amazing, to be frank. And you put that once you see this kind of angle, at that point you question, the typical approach of, okay, yeah, accelerator program, 500K seed round, hiring, ESOP plan, and la la la. It makes sense for sure for many areas, but in my view, the key point is not that this is wrong. This is fully right, and progress is also led by OpenAI or Claude, Anthropic, etc., etc. But progress is also led by other 99 areas of industries, because in the end, Starlink is amazing, but if you don't have water, electricity, and eventually improvement on even essential facilities like bridges, okay, or transportation in your country, you can't live. And when we discuss, in my view, AI, crypto, etc., we are touching the 0.1% of early adopters that look into the future for the next 20 years, but the world, the 99.9% is not there yet. Then I am in love with Perplexity, for example. My research improved so much. Perplexity, I'm not sponsoring or paying absolutely this company, but in my view, they will replace Google for sure for research, and it's a totally different level. Still, nobody. Do you have Perplexity on your phone? I don't think so. Nobody. No. You see, and you are super, forward thinking and active.
I need to look into that after this.
It's crazy. But this proves the point that sometimes you don't want to launch or live in what is going to. I don't think the only working vision is to build what is going to be the next Google in 20 years. Maybe sometimes it is smart to build what today is going to be an amazing business generating a lot of value, and then you can diversify as you are doing. It's a different gameplay.
The thing is, there's also because everybody goes towards what's most, I would say, sexy, right? If I may say so.
Absolutely.
Because everybody wants to build the new app and the new thing. But for instance, if you want to go total addressable market, if you want to see a market opportunity, there's one point, I think the new census in India made it the most populous country on earth now. It's 1.6 billion people.
Yeah.
If you've been to India, I don't know if you have.
I lived in India.
Oh, so you know what I'm talking about. So like the challenges that they have with 1.6 billion people are less so like, okay, giving everybody internet and so on and so forth. Of course, that too. But you need to build that infrastructure for that.
100%.
And then the other thing is, okay, these people need sewage systems and they need water pipes and need all these things. And everyone's competing to offer them an app for something. But no one's building toilets and sewage systems. And
especially if you allow me, that's why I found your profile and even what you're building so interesting. Because usually, you have people in their 50s, 60s, 70s with zero even processes, no Slack, no companies managed probably with the same model of the 60s of the last century. And if you bring in instead a tech or more modern approach in them, you can have a spike in productivity, efficiency, happiness, career progress of the people you onboard. You will hire faster because you will attract people like you, which are still the top 10%. And you can scale these businesses in an amazing way. And I came to this conclusion after a while, because my fiance, she's in real estate development as well. So I saw different dynamics and I found them super interesting. Out of curiosity, Jan, how do you, because you are playing essentially your strategy across different countries. How do you define with your brother, in your company, where to allocate investments for, I'm going to grow the drilling company in Ecuador versus in Argentina? What's the process, if you can share it, of course?
Yes, absolutely. So it's kind of like a fluid process. So it doesn't go through, let's say, a hard set of KPIs, because it goes through a hard set of KPIs, but we assign the weights in a different manner. So we look at long-term versus short-term planning. And then whether or not that fits the business strategy of that individual unit, but then how that in a matrix structure fits into the overall portfolio strategy. Mm-hmm. So let's say broad strokes, the idea of our conglomerate is we want to be part of the energy transition. So we want to focus a little bit on the energy part of things. and we want to be part of the energy transition, right? Why do I say transition and not just modernization or something like that? It's because in many parts of the world, especially if you have listeners here in the West, that everybody thinks that the world is kind of like the West because it's what they're used to. So everybody thinks, no, we need to decarbonize and all that, and that's all true. We need to do all those things, but we forget that there's some areas in the world that they still don't have electricity yet, not even the one made out of coal. So we need to reach those people too, right? So we need to be able to set ourselves up in a way that we still kind of like phase out the old economy, and then we need to start pouring the money from what's the old economy into the new set of economy, right? In the energy sector. So that means that right now we're still building oil and gas assets, we're still building gas pipelines, we're still building oil pipelines, we're still building slurry lines for mines, so mining ducts and so on. That's something that we're doing now. That's short term, let's say, because that's the most, let's say, profitable. We use those profits to invest in renewable energy assets because we think that this is the shift that's going to happen. Eventually, the world will run out of oil and gas. This will happen. I think it's going to be later than most people think, and that rather than sooner, because there's new technologies being developed there as well, and so on. But I think at some point, the marginal cost, like the renewable energy technologies are going to become so good that the marginal cost of doing it the old way is just not going to make economic sense anymore. But then you have a different challenge in the old economy. So now you have pipes rusting everywhere in the jungle, in the mountains. So that needs to be unbuilt. Otherwise, this is a catastrophe, right? So someone needs to decommission them.
Of course.
Which means unbuilt, unmake, take away. That's also money to be made. I want to do that as well. So we want to finish building oil and gas. We want to help decommission the old oil and gas infrastructure that needs to be changed. We want to retrofit those pipes that you can, so that picture it like this: if you can retrofit a gas pipeline, an old natural gas pipeline, so that it passes green hydrogen, that would be fantastic. You don't have to rebuild green hydrogen. And then on the other side, we have the renewable energy assets, which is not just generation, because everybody focuses on power generation, which is less the constraint. The constraint is actually on distribution. Like, you can set up wind farms across Europe and solar farms across Europe and generate enough power. But how do you get it from A to B? How do you get it to the homes? Well, you need to build all this, develop the distribution networks for electricity. And for that, you need thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of hours. That's actually the issue. So we look at both. We want to cater to the old economy and cater then to the new. This is, let's say, the long-term thinking. Short-term thinking, we also do opportunistic stuff. So we're in a very unique position that we are established in multiple countries, so that we can take advantage of regional arbitrage. So I'll give you an example. We work a lot in Ecuador, and the currency in Ecuador is the US dollar. If, for some reason, this is just out of coincidence, something that's happening right now in Brazil, the Brazilian real devalues a lot. Well, guess what? Maybe I need to profit shift, take some of those dollars from that don't yield me enough, let's say, rentability, usability, additional profit in Ecuador, and I move it to Brazil just because I get an advantage in the currency. Or you have, for instance, political shifts that influence this. Argentina has been shaking up a lot, right? So there's a lot going on in Argentina with Javier Milei, with a new president there. There's a lot of projects coming out. The economy there is kind of stabilizing. This is a country where no one wanted to invest in because the currency was so unstable. Now they're slowly getting their currency, I wouldn't say pegged to the dollar, but in a more stable way. Well, we are right neighbors, so it makes sense for us to start investing in it and building up organizations to help build that country. And then the last example I'll use is Guyana. This is a country that used to be among the poorest in Latin America. It's on the northeast corner of South America, but it's a place, it's 800,000 people. That's not nothing. But they found one of the largest reservoirs of oil and gas in the world right off of their coast. So this is a country that is going to start, it will need to produce this oil. And this oil, if you see that in comparison by the small amount of heads that are there, is going to make it into a petrostate. Now, the difference between the old petrostates and this one is this is a country that's very, very, very poor and all of a sudden has all this income. So forget the oil and gas industry for now. Just think of this. This is a country that needs everything, wants everything, and now suddenly can pay for everything. Well, they need roads and they need schools and they need airports and they need
Of course.
fiberglass technology. They
course.
need everything you have, they want. So someone needs to go there and build it for them. So it's opportunistic for me to go there and find out what can I do here? What's my play in this country and how can I leverage that? And then I co-leverage that with, for instance, so I have a construction company. So why can't I build at cost for me facilities to operate within the opportunities of that market? I don't have to hire a local construction company and they make a margin off of me. So this is how we look at things, and this is how we allocate resources.
How many hours per every year you spend on a plane?
In hours is going to be, I cannot account for that in hours, but I can account for that in days.
Oh, okay.
Days that I fly. So I'm trying to reduce that, not only because of carbon footprint, but also because I want to have, let's say, more share of enjoyable life for myself. But due to nationality and taxation issues, I actually keep an Excel spreadsheet. I call it the residence tracker.
Oh, okay.
Where every day I track where I am and which country, so that I know like how many days I've been in which country, so I know where am I tax resident of, and so I comply with the law. And because of that, I also register when I fly. And last year I took 119 flights, for instance.
Oh gosh.
There's 365 days a year, so that means I've been taking, on average, every 2.83 days a flight. And 2/3 of those flights has been across the Atlantic, so between Europe and Latin America.
No.
Yes.
Wow. Because I know a lot of people who travel a lot. For me, I guess it was 2019 where I did something similar. But 190 is that is crazy. It's like you're like always on a flight, essentially.
Mostly. So to give you an average week example, in an intense travel week, it would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Brazil, Thursday and Friday in Ecuador, then Saturday, Sunday in Peru. Then I'll be Monday, Tuesday the following week. I'll be in Guyana. Then I'll fly to Lisbon. I'll be 4 days in Lisbon, and then I fly to Oman, and then that's how it goes. It just goes on.
If I may ask you, just to understand, so do you fly commercial? Do you fly private? Do you fly the mix?
So it's not so I fly mostly 99% of the time I fly commercial. It's simply also mathematics.
Mathematics, right?
If I were within just Europe, I have enough flight hours that it may sense to fly private. But the thing is also it's cost. The distances I fly need a plane that's so expensive that I unfortunately cannot afford it, and it also makes no economic sense for me. So I sit on regular commercial planes. But also the construction sites that we have are not in places where there's necessarily an airport. So for that, you need to take private flights, but it's not the sexy private jet. I'm talking about the Cessna that's 4 seats, the helicopter into the Amazon jungle to a construction camp. And then there's also no 5-star hotel. You sleep in a container with 4 people.
Yeah, of course. It's not like
the real world.
It's the real world. No, absolutely. Because a lot of people think, sometimes, private or commercial, it's for a need. It's like for gaining time, and it's not for, I'm smoke my cigar and they do an Instagram reel. No, at all. There is so much also going on in the place where you arrive. If you need to travel, it usually is not for only enjoying time, right? There's going to be hard choices and hard also meetings to do. So can I ask you last question, and maybe let's see also, I think we are going to publish this interview in a couple of weeks. Let's see the comments and the questions. I would love to have you in 2025 again, because I would like to see some questions more, because I have so many questions I need to learn, to be frank. Because for me, if there is a guy coming from, I'm scaling up my company, Series C round from B, it's something I've seen many times, and I know what's going on. But in this case, I'm super interested because it's a new thing for me also to understand the why behind it and how it works. And I believe this can be interesting for a lot of people because it's contrarian by default, right? A lot of people are now, let's do the next AI or crypto startup, which is great, of course, but at the same time, there is an entire world still here. So Portugal, why we are in Lisbon? You are flying everywhere. How did you come up with Lisbon?
So to be quite frank with you, I'm a big fan of transparency and honesty. The reason why we chose Portugal in the end is because we realized that when I say we, I'm me and my wife. We realized that we spend so little time in every country we work in because we have to kind of like rotate all these countries, as I just explained a minute ago. That it made sense that we get to choose. We're in the luxury position that we get to choose our tax residency, right? And to me, this was first and foremost a tax play. So I had some advantages to relocate to Portugal under the NHR, and they made economic sense. I also checked the requirements for it. I have a lawyer, an accountant, and my family office checked into it as well. It just made sense for us, and we committed to Portugal. And we made a commitment. We're not just the people that just fly in and out only a few days a year. No, we've bought property. We've relocated my family here. My wife lives here. My daughter was just born 5 months ago, so she will go to school here. And this is also the reason why I use this as my base, and I always come back here.
100%. And I wrote a guide about the new NHR coming up, and we had a chat this weekend about it in the sense of Portugal, in my view, with the NHR 1.0 and again with the 2.0, probably has been the most forward-thinking country in Europe for sure. And again, it's not a tax haven at all. It's a tax exemption methodology that makes lots of sense. And in my view, it's very brilliant because people like you, people like me, we are not planning, oh, we stay here 6 months, we take the benefits and then we run away. No. We are here. We are doing a lot of stuff here, directly, indirectly, kids at school and so far and so on. And it's 10 years long. So it's enough to plan and to settle down, I would say. And you were mentioning in Portugal, construction. Out of curiosity, what's your take about, Portugal and real estate in general?
So I just started working in real estate as well here in Portugal, investing in real estate in Portugal. I think it's a very attractive market because market conditions support the claim that the boom that we've experienced is going to continue. Then again, if you see the structural conditions of the economy here, you always have like that scratching itch at the back of your mind. Is this a bubble or is it not? And if I may get into detail with this so the first part of my answer is, well, it's very simple. You look at macroeconomic trends and you can say, listen, how many homes are being built in Portugal, let's say at bulk every year, and how much net new people moving into the country. That's the difference between people moving out and people moving in. It's positive. So more people coming in than there are houses being built. That means that there's more pressure on the market, which means prices in real estate are going to go up. Now, they're not going to go up across the board equally. Obviously, the more attractive the area, the more real estate prices go up. Then there's other market trends that show you whether or not this trend will continue. I think Lisbon, as a city especially, has done a great job attracting, first, let's say the NHR wealthy people to start developing the real estate here. With that, the city became beautiful. There's also like a standard. You cannot simply buy an old building, tear it down, build something new. No, you have to preserve it with a historical facade, historical color. This is done in such a way that the city looks beautiful, and then more tourists come in, and it gets on the map for people. The second wave was this was for the golden visa and so on and so forth. That made you buy property in order for you to come. Now you have the second wave of that, which is with the NHR and so on. It's starting to make sense for a lot of digital nomads and people of that sort, or high net worth individuals to come and set up shop here. And now with all this talent being here and all these resources being here, it makes sense for companies to follow, right? This has now become similar to what Dublin was maybe at the end of the 90s, became attractive because there's a lot of talent here. There's a lot of infrastructure for them. So startups go looking for that, and tech companies in general go looking for that. Then there's also the access to electricity. A lot of people are not aware of that, but I work in the old economy, so I am. That a lot of the internet is like underwater cable, sea cable, that's laid and connecting service between America and Europe. And if you are between those nodes, you have quicker access to information. Why is that? You may think that couldn't be true because the internet is just data flowing through cables and so on. But the thing is, there's a physical limitation to that because data also travels through those cables at the speed of, let's call it, I don't know what the exact speed of the data travels, But imagine it would be the speed of light. Even that has a limitation. How long does it take to go from America to Europe, and then from Lisbon to maybe Munich and so on? So those micros or nanoseconds or seconds, total seconds, add up, especially if you're computing, using a lot of computing power. So being at those nodes gives you an advantage. And Lisbon is situated in a good situation because a lot of those cables also land here. They used to be all in the UK, but the UK is no longer part of Europe. So now Portugal is at this strategic advantage. So I think those are trends that indicate that the market is going to continue growing because there's a lot of pressure coming in. But then there's the other side of it, where you say, okay, you have a two-class system, if I may say so, here in Portugal. You have the wealthy expats that earn money in a different economy abroad on an international level, but their spending patterns are the Portuguese patterns, so they live like kings. They get to use the nice real estate, and the city adequates to them. We'll get into that in a second, but that's a new development that you don't see everywhere in Europe. But then you also have the average Portuguese or immigrants that come here for the non-tech jobs, right? And they are facing a housing market where the rent prices are a number of multiples over what they make. So they no longer can afford to live in the city. And that's when you think, wait a minute, how can an apartment in Lisbon be worth, like let's say 100 square meters in the city center of Lisbon, be worth more than Barcelona?
Or Rome.
Or Rome.
Roma, yeah.
And then if you put it into perspective to the average local salary, and you're like, an average person would need 120, 150 years to pay this off. Then you're like, the math isn't kind of hitting, but it's because we've created those two-tier systems.
May I ask you, how do you think this is going to be fixed?
So the only way I've seen it fixed, I don't know if, I don't want to get into the merit whether the government will be able to fix this or not, but the only way I've seen it fixed is by making more housing.
More housing, for sure.
And then the market will freely regulate who gets to live where, but the only way to service a housing shortage is solving the housing issue.
100%. Jan Pablo Laenge, or Laenge. It has been very, very nice actually to have this chat, and we covered so many topics. If you, make me this great, pleasure to come back in a couple of months.
I would love to,
because we need to expand and unfold. And for me, this was a super interesting. I think we are hitting so many topics. Some of them controversial in one direction, others in other, directions. And I think they need to be expanded because sometimes, in 1 hour you can get, an overview. But congrats for first of all, where you're pushing, forward with a high intensity life, and we'll be in touch for sure. And maybe do you want to say something also, German and Brazilian for saying, in Portuguese, Brazilian for saying hi to our audience?
Yes, absolutely. Foi prazer participar do podcast hoje. Foi muito legal. Want me to say something in German as well?
Of course.
Und falls wir deutsche Zuhörer haben, war mir eine große Freude. Ihr seht, die Welt ist eigentlich klein. Wir sind alle irgendwie verbunden und es gibt Möglichkeiten überall auf der Welt. Man muss sie nur suchen.
Wunderbar.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Perhaps we can record the next one in Rio de Janeiro. You're cordially invited to visit me there.
I'm in, absolutely. Let's do it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.